begin in the ABC 7 Alert Center with that breaking news. As we reported on ABC 7 at 4 just 30 minutes ago, 6 El Paso County Jail inmates are accused of killing a fellow inmate. And we have photos of the 6 suspects. They are all charged with murder, except for the one on the far left side of your screen. Juan Alberto Ortiz is charged with capital murder, which means he could receive life in prison or the death penalty if he is convicted. And new at 5, ABC 7 found a jail record showing Ortiz had already been in jail for another murder in December of 2022. He's accused of shooting and killing his mother after an argument. The jail records also show the other suspects were already behind bars for crimes including smuggling and drugs. The victim was identified as 57-year-old Jesus Torres, and ABC 7 is working to find out why he was in jail. The sheriff's office detention officers found him unresponsive inside his cell. They tried to provide medical help, but they later declared him dead. Investigators have not said how he was killed. The sheriff's office only described this as an assault. The 6 inmates have been rebooked on the additional charges. Jail administrators from both the downtown facility and the jail annex are currently working on separating inmates. We broke the story on the KVIA News app. You can download it to get phone notifications anytime we are following breaking news here in the borderland.
Our top story this afternoon, we now have very specific details regarding the homicide investigation underway at the El Paso County Jail Annex. 6 inmates are now facing murder charges after allegedly killing another inmate. Documents obtained recently by KTSM state that 57-year-old Jesus Torres had been dead in his cell for about 12 hours when he was finally located. The officer assigned to that cell block reportedly saw Torres in the lower bunk covered with his blanket unresponsive. One of the suspected inmates is seen through surveillance video retrieving a so-called kite message or message from the outside from under the door. Video footage also from Sunday night around 7 o'clock was provided by detention personnel showing Torres being hit, punched and kicked while 2 other inmates allegedly acted as lookouts. Court documents also detailing the apparent violent attack on Jesus Torres, including a plastic bag being wrapped over his head and other signs of torture. Top story this afternoon, we now have very specific details regarding the homicide investigation underway at the El Paso County Jail Annex. 6 inmates are now facing murder charges after allegedly killing another inmate. Documents obtained recently by KTSM state that 57-year-old Jesus Torres had been dead in his cell for about 12 hours when he was finally located. The officer assigned to that cell block reportedly saw Torres in the lower bunk covered with his blanket unresponsive. One of the suspected inmates is seen through surveillance video retrieving a so-called kite message or message from the outside from under the door. Video footage also from Sunday night around 7 o'clock was provided by detention personnel showing Torres being hit, punched and kicked while 2 other inmates allegedly acted as lookouts. Court documents also detailing the apparent violent attack on Jesus Torres, including a plastic bag being wrapped over his head and other signs of torture. And as the investigation on the inmate death in New Mexico is also happening, El Paso's Sheriff Richard Wiles is answering his own questions about an inmate's brutal death that happened back here in El Paso just a week ago. Our KTSM 9 news reporter Carla Draxler has more on that case.
They have to take extra precautions because these guys are very unpredictable.
A rare look inside the El Paso County Jail Annex after an inmate, Jesus Torres, was killed last week allegedly by 6 other inmates.
You're going to see when you go in there, there's 144 people. They're extremely loud.
This noise is what the guards hear every day. Sheriff Richard Wiles explains this is why they couldn't hear the assault.
But the interesting thing is none of the other inmates hit the emergency button. And they're located throughout the sleeping quarters and the housing unit. And all they had to do was hit that button and not even say a word.
Guards do their checks every hour.
Go ahead.
2 guards go from unit to unit, while the 3rd one is monitoring them from the guard station, where all common areas are visible on camera.
But when the checks are being done, they tend to be more focused on the officers doing the checks to make sure there's no attacks against them.
Torres was assaulted and murdered inside the sleeping area, which has cameras, but they don't provide a live feed. When the guards came to do their hourly check, they saw Torres in bed.
They placed him in a position to make it look like he was sleeping, and also placed a blanket over his head.
The 6 inmates were reportedly blocking the doors and windows, with 2 acting as a lookout, all a part of a plan.
So this was something that was in their mind, something that was planned, and they did everything they could to make sure that it happened.
Guards didn't notice Torres was dead until the next morning.
Thanks to Carla Draxler for that reporting. In the meantime, the criminal investigation is ongoing, and 5 inmates so far are facing murder charges. One of the inmates, though, is facing capital murder charges. The sheriff also says after that investigation is complete, they will then proceed with the administrative investigation to see what was done, at least on the guards' side.
And you may recall last week an inmate at the El Paso County Jail Annex was found dead, the victim of homicide. Several inmates, 6 inmates, are charged with murder and capital murder of 57-year-old Jesus Torres. Today, KTSM spoke with Sheriff Richard Wiles about the homicide, and we take you inside the jail annex for a look inside. Our KTSM 9 News reporter Carla Draxler joins us with more on today's news conference. Hi, Carla.
Hey there, Stella. Well, one of the questions that came out of this incident last week was how were 6 inmates able to go inside the sleeping cell of this other inmate, assault him, and then murder him without the guards noticing anything?
Assaulted the victim and killed him in one of the sleeping areas. Then they placed him in a position to make it look like he was sleeping, and also placed a blanket over his head, so that when the checks were made, the officers believed that he was sleeping.
Sheriff Wiles says not one of the surrounding inmates alerted that anything was going on. Within one living quarter that holds 144 inmates, there are 3 guards on duty at all times. And this is per regulation, according to Sheriff Wiles. I got to see the guard station, which overlooks the living quarters with cameras, giving a live feed of all common areas, but not the individual sleeping cells, which is where the murder took place. Sheriff says the 6 inmates were blocking the doors and windows of the sleeping area so the guards couldn't see what's going on either in real time or through the cameras, and with constant loud noise, it was impossible to hear anything as well. Now, the guards reportedly didn't notice that the inmate Torres was dead until the very morning, because as they do their checks every single hour, they thought that he was just asleep since he was covered with a blanket and was in his bed. Another thing that the sheriff said was that these murders inside jails here in El Paso are not a common occurrence. The last one that happened was in 1996. But another thing that we know about this particular incident is that it is, or they believe it to be, gang related. And there are currently 11 gangs inside of the jail facilities here in El Paso County. However, the sheriff tells us there are 3 that they're closely monitoring right now because they are posing a threat. For now, reporting in Far East El Paso, I'm Carla Draxler. Back to you, Estella.
Okay, Carla, thank you very much. And as we reported, 5 inmates are facing murder charges in the death of Torres. 18-year-old Juan Alberto Ortiz is the only inmate facing a capital murder charge in this.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of Greenlit Gang TV. Really quick, guys, thank you so much for checking out the channel. Thank you for the views. Thank you for the subscriptions. It means a lot. I love bringing this stuff to you guys. I would have had my last video up a little sooner because of the content I cover on this channel. I have to go through a lot of guideline stuff. Sometimes I got to wait for my videos to clear. But regardless, it just means a lot. You guys watching it means a lot, watching this channel grow. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers. We're getting closer each and every day. So today we're going to be going to El Paso, Texas. We're going to be covering a gang that I have not covered yet. I'm really excited to, and that is Barrio Azteca. Barrio Azteca is a very notorious gang, a very violent gang. We're going to give brief history before we get into our story today. So, Barrio Azteca, or Los Aztecas, is a Mexican-American street and prison gang originally based in El Paso, Texas, which is where our story takes place today, and Ciudad Juarez, or Chihuahua, Mexico. The gang was formed in the Cofield unit, located near Tennessee Colony, Texas, by Jose Raulio Rivera, a prisoner from El Paso in the early to mid-'80s. It expanded into a transnational criminal organization that traded mainly across the U.S.-Mexico border. It is currently one of the most violent gangs in the U.S. They are said to have about 3,000 members in the U.S. and about 5,000 in Juarez. Now, interestingly enough, they have footholds in Texas, New Mexico. Those are states you'd kind of expect, right? They're close together. But then it also says Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. So it kind of gives you an idea, right? The gang has far-reaching tentacles, okay? It's very violent. It's got a strong foothold in both the United States and in Mexico. And not a lot of gangs can say that. A lot of gangs have, ties to down south across the other border, but they're stronger actually in Mexico. But they are very strong in the United States, so that makes them very unique. And like I said, some of their allies are La Línea, which is basically the armed wing of the Juarez cartel. And the Juarez cartel brought them in and kind of created this armed wing, La Línea, to fight off the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo, El Mayo, right? They were trying to take over the drug trade. It's all about territory, right? Especially in the drug trade. These corridors in the United States, which the United States, man, we like to consume our narcotics, right? And that's how Mexico's economy is largely supported. Just the facts are the facts, right? We support Mexico's economy with our narcotic intake. We like drugs here in the United States. It just is what it is. And that's how gangs like Barrio Azteca thrive. And they get a foothold in New Mexico, and they get a foothold in the United States. So we're going to be covering a particular story out of El Paso that happened in November of 2023. That is the death of an inmate at the El Paso County Jail in the Annex, Jesus Torres, 57 years old. 6 inmates were charged in his death. Those guys were Manuel Alejandro Vargas, Juan Alberto Ortiz, George Lopez, Jesus Adrian Rocha, Giovanni Diencio Ramos, and Christian Carrillo. They were all held on murder charges. Interestingly enough, one of them that really stood out to me was Juan Alberto Ortiz was already in on a previous murder case in which his mother was shot to death. Yeah, these guys do not play. They are Barrio Azteca members. Very violent, very much like other cartels or kind of offshoots of cartels. They're there to prove a point if you steer them wrong. And a lot of gangs do that, not just cartels, but cartels are known for that, okay? And in this case, these guys really did that too, the way that they murdered Jesus Torres. And after this, the jail got a lot of scrutiny, separating gang members, which is something county jails and prisons deal with on the daily. How do you know who to separate, how to separate? You're getting told all these different things all at once. So, the jail's kind of got to run and clean things up and make a good public speech that, hey, we're going to separate, we're going to focus on safety, yada, 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 when an inmate dies at a county jail. So court documents state just before 8 a.m. on Monday, November 27th, officers assigned to a pod at the Annex discovered Torres lying on his bottom bunk and was covered with a blanket in room 1018. An officer uncovered Torres and saw his head wrapped in a plastic trash bag that was full of blood, according to court documents. Torres also had earphones wrapped around his neck, and medical to staff determines Torres had no signs of life. A detective met with an individual who stated that before the incident, inmate Manuel Alejandro Vargas told them that he was waiting for confirmation from outside sources that Torres, pay attention to this, was an ex-Barrio Azteca gang member and that he had also had other personal matters with Torres. Vargas also told the individual that once he had confirmation, he was going to assault Torres and have him kicked out of the cell block, according to court documents. The individual also told the detective that on the evening of Sunday, November 26th, so one day before, he saw several of the inmates head upstairs and assault Torres. So this was over a process of a couple days. Court documents state that after the assault, Vargas told the individual that Torres wouldn't die, quote, so he grabbed him by the neck and punched him in the scrotum until he stopped moving and stabbed him in the eyes. Jeez. Juan Alberto Ortiz told the individual that he beat Torres with a cane, and Jesus Adrian Rocha told the individual that he got several punches in on Torres and walked out to change his uniform. Quote, once his head was split open, end quote. Man, Brutal. Detention officials working at the Annex provided surveillance footage of the assault, and court documents state the following incidents took place. Just after 7 p.m. on Sunday, November 26th, Torres is seen walking into room 1018. Ortiz was already in the room when Torres walked in. Vargas, Rocha, Giovanni Ramos, George Lopez, and Christian Carrillo then enter the room as well. So now you got a gang mentality, a gang mob going here. Torres is seen sitting on the lower bunk, and the inmates are standing around him, and they appear to be talking with Torres. Minutes later, Carrillo is seen exiting the room and walks downstairs to a door that connects to another cell block, where he retrieves a kite message from under the door. Now, kite, for those of you that don't know, are messages written that are shot around the jail. You can use fishing line, write a message down, tie it up with some string from your pants. However, right, it's a couple different ways to do it, and inmates can pass messages along from cell block to cell block, upstairs, downstairs. It'd be crazy how creative it is. You can go on YouTube right now. You're on YouTube watching this, hopefully. YouTube, jail kites being passed. Really, really fascinating stuff. At the same time, Torres is seen being struck multiple times by the other inmates. Carrillo goes back into the room and watches Torres as he's assaulted. Torres is also stomped, kicked, and struck with a wooden cane. Carrillo exits the room and remains outside on the top tier as a lookout. You see that a lot in these jail assaults, right? As the assault continues to take place, Ramos also acts as a lookout as he stands inside the room and obstructs the view. Lopez is seen wiping down the floor and then exits the room and walks to a restroom that is located on the top tier. Rocha is seen exiting the room and walking to another room that is directly underneath and swaps uniforms with another inmate. Because it got bloody. That's why you got to change out uniforms, all the blood. Lopez is seen putting on his uniform while standing on the top tier and then re-enters room 1018, and Ramos exits the room. Ortiz, Vargas, and Lopez all remain in the room with Torres. Ortiz is seen beating Torres with the wooden cane. Vargas is seen attempting to put a plastic trash bag over Torres' head. Lopez is seen standing by the doorway and blocks the view to the inside of the room. Goes on to say, Vargas is seen standing on top of Torres as he lays on the floor, and Ortiz continues to assault Torres with the cane. I'm like, where'd they get a cane from? But Lopez is seen wiping the floor with a towel. Torres is placed back on his bunk as the assault continues at 7:45 p.m. Then Lopez exits the room. Ortiz and Vargas remain in the room with Torres and are seen wiping and cleaning the floor. Ramos and Carrillo remain as lookouts outside the room. The assault on Torres continues as he lays on the bunk at 8:01 p.m. Ortiz and Vargas are seen exiting the room. Just before 8 a.m. on Monday, November 27th, that's when Torres is discovered. So, man, it's like 12 hours later he gets discovered. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Okay? And like I said, these guys that killed him, these Barrio Azteca members, the charges they were in on was not like petty theft. I'm going to read you the charges they were already in on, a couple of them. George Lopez was in on a murder. Okay? Oh, no, I'm sorry. His original charge was probation violation for deadly conduct, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and engaging in organized criminal activity. Original charge for Jesus Adrian Rocha, manufacturing delivery of a controlled substance. Giovanni Ramos, probation violation and smuggling of persons. Christian Carrillo's prior charge was also smuggling of persons. And like I said, with Ortiz, his prior charge was murder. And they said he shot his mom. So you're messing with very high violent gang members. And like I said, there's an aura around gangs, especially like a Barrio Azteca, which has ties to the cartel. Violence is not only a must, you know, in certain situations, it's encouraged. You make an example out of people. If this guy Torres was an ex-gang member or an ex-member of the gang and he did something to fall out of favor, I couldn't find exactly what he did wrong, but it was something to initiate and to sustain this kind of beating, you know. So, yeah, and this is how it goes, man. And what makes me think about this is this stuff happens in the States. You guys, Mexico is 1,000 times worse. Okay, Mexico is an absolute war zone to this day. I don't know if you guys follow the news. I just encourage you to Google Mexico presidential election and see how many candidates have been assassinated. We're talking, I mean, a lot, a very, very large number have already been assassinated. This is how they get down. They know one thing, and that's if something or somebody is in your way, violence. Violence is always the answer. And it spills over into our justice system. It spills over into our prisons and jails. And this is just another example of that. So there you guys have it. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Until next time, peace.